it really goes down to there's so many things you can get from that, looking at where your education is headed, what kind of refresher training you need. Do you need to bring in a vendor to be training on this? Maybe it's a vendor tray that lives in-house that you always have issues with, so just looking at all of the different things that you could bring in from this data to help with your next HSPA poster, your next process improvement idea,
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, Clean Freaks, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Clean podcast, Season 29, Planet Assembly. I'm your host, Bobby Parker, and on today's episode, I'm bringing in a couple of presenters from the 2025 HSPA show that happened here in Louisville. When I met these folks at the show here in Louisville, they were giving a presentation of a poster that they had put together on quality assurance. I didn't know if you knew this. HSPA accepts poster presentations, projects that have been done about the industry or in a particular facility. And these two presenters were awarded first prize for their presentation on quality assurance. So we're going to be talking in today's episode about what practical steps can you put in place in your department to make sure that the work that happens in assembly is done with a high degree of quality and that the products that your surgeons are receiving are ready for patient care. How can we improve their satisfaction, reduce the number of defects that are reported to sterile processing from the OR, improve the team morale, maybe even fix some staffing issues? We've got all of those topics bundled up into this from some award-winning presenters. So I hope it's going to be helpful to you and your department and that we're all going to come away with this with some knowledge about how we can make improvements on the ground for the patients that we serve each and every day. So we will be right back after this short break with our award-winning presenters.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Dr. Timothy Hurtado and Tori Ruiz, both directors of sterile processing out there on the West Coast. Guys, welcome to the studio. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bobby. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, absolutely. I am very excited to talk with you all. I gave a little bit of a teaser there in the intro about HSPA posters, and we had an opportunity to connect at the HSPA show around your poster project that you did. So I'm excited to dive into that with you. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves? What's your role in sterile processing look like, or maybe your career? Give us a thumbnail of what you've been doing in the industry.
Well, I guess I'll go first. A thumbnail of 25 years. I'm not sure how to do that, but I started in the military, Air Force, as a surgery tech, and there we do sterile processing as well. So that's where I learned. Great process of learning there. See one, do one, teach one is how we did it. It's not necessarily the greatest now, but got through that, got out of the military and said, what next? And I did kind of fall into sterile processing leadership role pretty quick after that, and then kind of worked my way up. Developed a really interesting passion for it. And, because it's kind of a passion for the underdog. It tends to be a little bit of a missed impact on patient care. And so I really wanted to continue helping with that and working on process improvement wherever I go. And it's just been a, kind of a fun ride of that. And well, maybe sometimes not as fun, but, and that's a really small thumbnail That's what you called it, right? A thumbnail?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And it is funny how this industry can be sticky in that way. You just get hooked on sterile processing, hooked on patient safety. And even though maybe you didn't intend to find your way into it, it just becomes part of who you are. So great talking with you today. And Dr. Hurtado, getting to introduce you that way. I hear that that's kind of a new title for you. So congrats on finishing up that degree. You want to tell us anything about it?
Thank you. 6 years in the making for that. That was a very challenging but rewarding experience. Similar to Tori, my career started in the Navy, go Navy, in surgical technology, which incorporated sterile processing, got out of the military and kind of advanced my way up working for nonprofit, a for-profit, academic, and community hospitals in different leadership roles, and really putting good changes and processes in place to improve the flow and our quality controls that we have within our facilities. So it's been a journey. Definitely looked at how to apply, the new doctoral degree into this, and the doctors of SPD, as stated by some other colleagues. Looking forward to utilizing that to make more improvements.
Yeah, I love that. We need more thought, more study, more research, more training into how we can make our sterile processing departments better and how we can share that knowledge with the industry at large. And so I love that you all are passionate about doing that. That's the context in which we got connected, and you doing that in person at the HSPA show here in Louisville. So I want in our conversation today for us to talk a little bit about what these HSPA posters are, why somebody might do one. And then I hear that through the grading process that you all got a pretty great score on yours. And so I want to hear a little bit about that as well and dive into what it was that you did on your project and how it affects the assembly area, because assembly has been the topic of the season. So let's start at the top here. Congrats on the win with your HSPA poster. Could you tell us a little bit about what these poster presentations are and why you decided to put one together?
I think that you and Tim both said it. Sharing the knowledge is really important. These posters are a great way to do that. Lots of people from all over not even all over the country, all over the world now, are coming to the HSPA conference, and these posters are a great way for us to share, the process improvement we're working on, new projects, new just integrated things in our different departments. Everything that we're doing, can be shared. You don't necessarily have to be there to present a topic. Maybe you don't want to speak. Maybe it's not a thing that you're into. A poster is a great way to do that, and then you can stand by your poster and talk one-on-one with people like we did with you. You mentioned we got first place. We were surprised pleasantly, but we didn't even actually, I think, realize that there was a
grading process.
A first, second, third place kind of thing happening. We just
I don't know if that was new. I'd never seen that before, but that was pretty cool.
So that was exciting to see when we got there. We were not told ahead of time, but we just really wanted to share this because it was an honor to be chosen to have our poster shown at HSPA. We're really excited about that. Really excited to tell people about it. Anyone who stopped by that we talked to, thank you for that. We were pushed to start a second check system, which is what our poster is about. The impact that errors in the high-risk tray assembly we're having on surgical workflow, and more importantly, really on patient safety. We're seeing a lot of delays in the OR because of this, last-minute tray modifications, occasional missing incorrect instruments in there, and they're really especially in the complex procedures like orthopedics and cardiac surgeries. So it was really clear that we needed a proactive quality strategy to reduce these errors before they reach the OR.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to ask you some about that second check process because it sounds like a great idea, but obviously that's a resource decision to add second checks on trays. Because if we could do 3 checks on every tray, we probably would have no defects. But there's obviously some challenges to that from a process standpoint. So I want to dive more into that. Before I do, I've got one more question about this poster presentation process. Do you have to have a doctor of healthcare administration to put one of these things together and share it with the show?
Absolutely not. I think it's starting to become well known that there's opportunities for anyone in the field, technician, to be a managers, leaders, someone in the peri-op side. Really, this is an opportunity for anyone to share the work that they've done, and hopefully that can help change the industry and best practice. So I encourage anybody who's even slightly interested in it to look at that, get their ideas on, start looking at ideas in which they want to do a study or some kind of research on, how can we better implement processes? Because most likely throughout the year, there's 1, 2, or 3 things that you've already done to make some change within your department that can be broadcasted to the industry.
Yeah, thanks for hitting that softball over the fence for me. That's right. We want everybody sharing what they have to share with the industry. It makes all of us better. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that. One final plug on that before I quit teasing you about what the topic at hand is going to be. This poster presentation can be a great way for you to take that first step in participating in the HSPA show. If you maybe don't have the budget to get there or are having a difficult time justifying, how do we justify with administration getting approved to go? Sometimes these poster presentations are a great way to do that, like to celebrate something great your department has done, to share with the industry, to get it approved, and then go with the justification letter saying, look, our hospital is going to be celebrated at this conference. I'd like to go with a couple of my technicians to represent this poster and present it. That's an easy win right there. So start working on your poster project and join us in Baltimore next year. All right. So with that, let's dive into the topic of your poster presentation. You said that you were having some challenges with some of the trays, some higher risk trays, and implemented a second checks process. Is that right? So tell me a little bit about kind of the scope of this project. Was this one hospital? Was this across the system? And what kind of challenges were you having?
Yeah, this was a cumulative of many hospitals from both sides, surgery centers, as well as hospitals itself. The auditing approach came from trying to be proactive rather than reactive. Many times within this field, a lot of things are reactive. We only know that there's an issue when the issue occurs. Our thought process was, what can we do to implement a process in which we can catch those prior to it getting to the OR, getting to the patient, and causing either delays or potential SSIs. Those are probably the biggest things that our concern was. Many other industries that we look at, they have their quality checks in place. Amazon, you look at any distribution centers, Ford, Toyota, they all have some kind of quality check to be put out to check on those. So if, a simple computer or a phone gets a quality check, I think surgical trays deserve those second checks on for our patients.
Yeah, it's bananas when you think about it. Even the certification conversation and the training piece of it, like in Kentucky, you have to have a certification to cut hair because they want to make sure you can disinfect your clippers appropriately, but not to sterilize somebody's surgical instruments. That's just bananas. So you're right. We're definitely behind other industries, both in training and then in quality inspection. And so I definitely see the motivation there for adding another check. Now, as soon as we talk about quality inspection of trays, the immediate pushback that naturally comes up is we're running 150 trays behind every morning. Like there is no bandwidth for us to be able to do quality checks. I'm curious, since you've got so many different facilities involved in this project, did you encounter that at all? Departments that maybe don't have the bandwidth to do a check or had to add some resources to be able to accomplish a safety check or a second check on some of these high-risk trays?
One of the big challenges is going to be the resources. Labor costs are a big contributor to the overall cost of the facilities. However, what we saw in doing this prior to is that many issues with trays that were contaminated, we had to open multiple trays for the same case. So our inventory that was down was increased due to those quality errors. By implementing quality checks and ensuring that you have quality trays, you reduce the overall trays that are coming through because SPD is all about throughput, and you're able to focus and put that time that you had before processing trays now into the quality audit checks.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you don't have time to do it well once, you certainly don't have time to do it a second time because of the error that comes through. So yeah, that certainly could be part of the justification. Well, all right. So we know a little bit about the problem. We've got some high risk trays and we're trying to reduce the errors. I took a look at your poster and we looked at it as well at HSPA. And there was quite a bit of data on there from before the changes were made and then after the changes were made. Can you talk us through the types of data that you were gathering and why you were so careful to take some snapshots of what this data looked like, both before and after?
So from a data standpoint, and Tori can talk about some of those, but I'll talk kind of on the less common data points that some may miss is looking at the trends in days volume during the day, between AM shift all the way to overnights, looking at how that's affecting the quality of the trays, as well as looking at the time of the week. And then again, this data is an average, so it's not specific to one location. So, anyone looking at the poster has to look at their own data and have to look at their own operations. However, looking at the total amount of trays processed and where your bottlenecks are, and that could also result in maybe your staffing matrix that needs to be changed as well, and or the volume that is coming through in your sterile processing. How do you better adjust operations and staffing to accommodate for those higher end volumes?
But I think Tim talked about the important thing there is that, we've pulled so many different sites into this that it wasn't just one hospital or one surgery center that we're looking at here. This was several different ones. So our poster represents the average of that. However, each site would need to look at their own. They might not have your high-risk site or your high-risk trays at the site might not be orthopedics and cardiac, as we're talking about in this. Those were the ones throughout all of them that we found happen the most often. But, maybe your site is an ear and eye trays at a surgery center, or GI, stuff like that. It could be lots of different things. So it's really important that each site or management that's, trying to put this in place looks at their own internal stuff to see what's happening. So looking at those, Tim talked about tracking issues reactively. So every time you get a call to the OR, what are you being called for? Hopefully you're documenting that in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of tracking systems that help to document that now these days. At the ASC sites, we might not have those at some of those. So looking at how you're documenting that and starting there, I think it's important to start small because you're not going to get the buy-in from the staff to participate in this if you don't start small. So you can't just jump into we're doing second checks on all the trays because that's not realistic. You talked about staffing and the financial impact that has, on the site, but making sure that we're saying, okay, this is a tray that's always an issue. Let's do a second check just on this tray from another technician, and making sure that they really are understanding that they're going to work together on this. It's a partnership to get the tray to the patient for that patient care to get done and not have any issues. It's not me saying you did this wrong or vice versa. It's just saying we're second checking. This is something. And then it really goes down to there's so many things you can get from that, looking at where your education is headed, what kind of refresher training you need. Do you need to bring in a vendor to be training on this? Maybe it's a vendor tray that lives in-house that you always have issues with, so just looking at all of the different things that you could bring in from this data to help with your next HSPA poster.
Sure.
Your next process improvement idea,
Well, one of the things that I really appreciated about your all's approach is the amount of thoughtful data that you gathered in the context that maybe is not immediately obvious. So the most obvious one are reported defects from the OR when they call us and say, hey, I have a problem with this tray. But you also looked at things like on-time starts related to instrument processing issues. And you looked at staff satisfaction, both in the OR for surgeon satisfaction and staff satisfaction in sterile processing, who aren't getting wrangled by so many phone calls of upset surgeons and things like that. And it has a lot of impacts. And where I always struggled as a sterile processing leader, whenever you have this great idea of something you're going to do to fix things, is just to rush to implement it and change it and forgetting to take that data on the front end and really show the improvement. I do the same thing with DIY projects at home. I never remember to take the before picture. So you show somebody like, here's the bathroom I did. I don't have any pictures of what it looked like before, but trust me, it was bad, So yeah, the importance of gathering data and being thoughtful and being able to show the improvement and show the value. It's really important both for celebrating your team, speaking to administration about what you're accomplishing, and it really demonstrates the value when you go to share something like an HSPA poster. So I certainly appreciated that about it.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the data and presenting it to the C-suite, for the users to have the understanding that collecting this data is over a period of time. You won't have that within a week or even a month, which means you probably won't have the resources or be able to request those resources immediately. It's more of the collect the data, show the improvement in which it's resulted in, which if we improve surgeon satisfaction, decrease in turnover times and or defects, and put that into a financial view and bring that to the C-suite, then you can now advocate for, hey, I need to add 1 or 2 additional FTEs that are going to be specifically for quality audits, for quality events, and ensuring we have a good quality program within our sterile processing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's dive into the lever that you pulled specifically to try to get these gains to improve the errors, improve the surgeon satisfaction. You talked about adding second checks to high-risk trays, the problem trays that we've got trends on. So what does that second check look like in assembly? What specifically is happening there, and how deep does that go?
So that is, it's, of course, it's another SPD tech. So, hopefully, ideally, we talked about certification earlier and training and, so similar level. SPD tech is just going to take the tray once it's ready to be packaged, either wrapped or put in a container. And they're just going to look at it. They're going to go through, make sure everything is in there, make sure things are set right in there, because sometimes that causes its own issue, especially if you have a blue wrap tray. And just make sure that there's no bioburden left on there. And then they're going to sign it off. And the important part is the signing off, because they are then, taking a little bit of responsibility for that tray as well as the other person. And that creates that partnership that we talked about.
I think the other thing to focus on from a personnel standpoint is the approach in which that technician does the quality audits. And if there is an issue, how do they approach their colleague? And that's where the coaching comes in, where, when you're implementing this, you explain to them, look, this is to help collaborate. We're collaborating. If there's an issue, here's kind of a standard way of saying, hey, I identified X, Y, and Z. If they need to fix it, they can fix it. Or if we need to reprocess it back in decontam. But having that just culture and that compassion and empathy when you're having a conversation with your colleague, I think that's the other important thing that I reiterated, to make sure that it wasn't, hey, you made a mistake. Why are you always making mistakes? More of, hey, here's what occurred, and, and not making it punitive, but making it more of a collaborative approach.
Well, and really making it an educational opportunity too. So if you do find that some people are having the same mistake over and over again, and even on the same tray again, that's when you bring in either, if you have an educator, if you're lucky enough, get them, or call in vendors or do some training, as a leader in the department, or even bring in that tech who's having the issues to help do the training, and it really gives you opportunities to look for a lot of things that you can improve in the department and the OR. So.
Yeah, it's great whenever you can discover those proactively and be intentional about it, for sure. And Timothy, you said the words just culture, and we've talked about that a little bit on the show, and building this culture where we're going to respond to people not personally or punitively, but fairly, not based on the people we like or we don't like. We want to respond fairly to people. And so building that just culture is something that's talked about a lot, but the practice of how do you actually accomplish that to get technicians to take an educational, compassionate approach to speaking to one another about issues is a whole nother beast. Like, how do you actually achieve that just culture? And what I like about what you just said is it sounds like having that kind of peer checking process gives people a lot of practice to be able to do that. I think that's part of the problem. Like, the manager can talk about it until he's blue in the face, but if the technicians don't ever really have to put that in practice until like the big event happens, you don't really have a lot of opportunity to succeed there. So yeah, giving them some smaller wins to be able to collaborate and work together, I think can really work towards building that just culture. So
absolutely. Just to finalize that, I think it speaks volumes. The leader in that department representing and practicing that just culture every day, that will transcend into the culture of the department, in which they will start practicing in that way. So it all begins with the leader and setting that example.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we are doing, it sounds like a full another prep and pack of inspecting instruments, making sure they're all there, that bioburden's been removed, that indicators are in place, things like that. On this tray, we're doing it for high risk trays only. So we're not doing it on, every single tray that comes through the department. Can you talk us through some of the numbers of the benefits that you saw from implementing this in the departments? Did you see it bear out that the number of trays coming back from surgery were significant enough to justify all the extra labor that went into these checks?
Absolutely. Overall, and on average, we saw 40% or greater in tray error decrease. which is a huge significant reduction, which obviously resulted in improving the turnover times as well as the first case on times. I mean, that's another big thing coming in for the first day, opening the trays and realizing they're not ready or they have bioburden on it. That was improved. I think the biggest one, though, was staff engagement, seeing that go in the positive direction, but then also from the surgeon perspective. So not only are we sharing this data with C-suite, but we're also representing our department to the surgeon councils. If there's the general surgery or orthopedics, that a leader is there presenting and sharing that data. Sure, we got to talk about the bad stuff, right? Hey, this is where we were, but look where we're at now, and get the input from the surgeons. And, hearing them come back and say, this is the best I've seen in many years. At the same time, it's disheartening, but at the same time, it's great to hear that and to see that. And it gives the staff the ability to continue forward. Leaders, my suggestion, and if you can, bring down the C-suite when you have those wins. Bring down surgeons that are advocates and see those improvements, and just have a quick 5-minute spiel. Just say, hey, I thank you guys, appreciate what you've done, keep up the great work. That there, for them to see someone from the C-suite or from a surgeon, not yelling, but actually praising them, I think is huge for any department.
Yeah, it changes the narrative. I mean, your team already knows that they do awesome work, but being able to show that in the data and then experience the results of that in hearing some satisfaction from formerly disgruntled customers to happy customers and saying, hey, like I can really tell the difference. This is a place that I trust and I want to bring my patients. It definitely makes a difference for the team. I'm curious, are there any of the obstacles or challenges that you encountered along the way that you didn't expect, or maybe an outcome that was surprising to you that you didn't expect when you got started?
I think for me, and then Troy, you can jump in. I'm pretty sure you have a couple of them too, from a surgery center standpoint. For me, really was the buy-in from the staff. Initially announcing it, we're doing more work. That's what they hear. We're doing more work. Why are we doing this? Sharing that data and explaining what the reason is behind it, the why, and what's in it for them. Correct, right? Even though additionally is going to be more work in the beginning, you're going to start seeing it decrease in other areas, right? Your decontamination is going to be less. You're not going to have extra trays open just for one instrument. You're going to see that improvement. And then once they start seeing that, again, sharing that data, right? Don't keep that data hidden. Share with them on a weekly basis, share with them on a monthly basis, but also, again, celebrate the wins, the small wins. Every certain benchmark you get to, you set, have a party, ice cream party. It can be anything. Or, once you reach that milestone, that huge milestone, make it a good celebration and get like I said, the C-suites, the OR involved in celebrating those staff.
I mean, I think you kind of said them. There was a little bit of a surprise in I think that like Thursday afternoons ended up being kind of a higher time for errors, so looking at that allowed us to really look at like the staffing, contributing to that. The staffing didn't necessarily need to be on the Thursday afternoon. Maybe it needed to be a little before, what prepared for that Thursday afternoon that really caused the issues. I think a lot of times when we look at staffing, we're looking at, the OR volume, of course, but the OR volume and staffing for SPD, while they are directly connected, they're not necessarily going to correlate right exactly, because we're in SPD, we're there before and after the cases. So really looking at that. And on top of that, with these, especially orthopedics, those vendor trays and when they're coming in, when we'd like them to come in, but when they actually come in, sometimes it's a little different. So really looking at that, at all the different sites that had that, I think, we had a little bit of a surprise on where kind of the error, I guess the higher amount of errors was during the week. But it was great to see it, and it allowed us, like I said, to move staffing around when needed.
Yeah, I saw that chart. I did think that was surprising how perfect of a pyramid all of the errors of the days of the week made. So really interesting stuff. Well, congrats again on putting together such a great poster. More than that, congrats on the great results that you're seeing, that you're hearing from surgeons, that it's the best that they've seen in years at your facilities. As we wrap this up and bring it to a close, I know we've only kind of brushed the surface of what kind of work went into this project, but I'd like to give you the last word and an opportunity to say to the department out there that is considering starting a quality assurance project in their assembly area. What advice would you give them to help build some momentum and actually have some success as they get started?
I'll say some and then let Tim jump in on it. But top advice, start with the structure, but keep it simple. I think we mentioned that earlier, and you talked about it. Being excited as a leader and wanting to implement change is great, but starting really simple and kind of with a little bit of a smaller aspect of it is a lot more helpful when it comes to the team actually buying in and doing it.
Yeah, and I think reiterating to the staff the reason why, how it's going to impact them and improve their workflow. Again, building that just culture. As leaders, we should already be doing that in our everyday tasks and interactions with their staff, but also ensuring that they understand that it's a partnership. We're collaborating, we're working together. We are not being critics against each other. And then thirdly, like we talked about, track your metrics. Track it and boast about it, share it, and let anyone you go down and walk the halls, hey, this is what we're doing, maybe not the patients, but let your C-suite know, let your surgeons know, because to close off, there's been times where I've had surgeons where they've said, this is always occurring, but since I had the data and was able to share it with them, they realized, no, it's only occurred once in the entire year, and their framework and their thought process had changed and had a different view on it. So again, metrics.
Spoken like a true director. Well said. No, it is really important, and I appreciate that advice. Guys, this has been a phenomenal interview. I have a ton more questions and kind of practical considerations to ask about this, but it's going to have to wait for another day. If somebody out there also has similar questions or wants to get some advice about the QA project that they're getting off the ground or an unexpected obstacle that they encountered, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn probably the best way?
Yes, LinkedIn, I think, for both of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely encourage you to connect and continue the conversation there. If you haven't seen their poster, I would encourage you to check that out as well. I discovered that HSPA does put an archive of the digital files for free, easy access on the website. So just go to old Google and type in HSPA 2025 posters and you'll find it in one of the top results. So go check out their poster there. Timothy, Tori, thanks again for coming on the show. Great episode. Always good to talk with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Timothy Hurtado and Tori Ruiz, directors of sterile processing out on the West Coast, talking to us about their HSPA poster about quality assurance in sterile processing and how they made some effective changes to their process to improve surgeon satisfaction, to improve staff satisfaction, reduce the number of reported defects, and hopefully give better outcomes for the patients in their facilities. I think that was a fantastic and practical episode that hopefully you've got some takeaways that you can share with the team and implement in your own department. One of the things that these episodes always go by so fast. One of the things that I wish that we could have gotten maybe a little bit more time to talk about was, what does that risk assessment process look like to determine what's the high risk trays in your department? Because I agree, going from 0 to 60 of no quality assurance to we're going to double check everything all the time is just not sustainable. So how do we start small? How do we decide which trays that we're going to be doing quality assurance on? And I think what they shared about looking at the trending data of where we're having our issues is certainly a choice and probably the best one to get started on. Or maybe what are the low volume items that are really complicated, trays that someone's likely to make a mistake just because they haven't seen it in a while and it's difficult to work with. Picking out what are those few trays that we're going to be more proactive about from a checking perspective, or even just a random sampling quality assurance of pulling a sterile tray off the shelf and going through it and saying, according to our standards here in sterile processing, does this stand up to what we expect? And coming up with kind of a true quality percentage for our department of the trays that we opened. How many of them were actually the way that we expected them? Well, to help give you a little bit easier access to that poster that Dr. Hurtado and Tori put together, I'll go ahead and attach that here as bonus material on the episode. So if you're listening to this episode from the Beyond Clean app, you can go to the little gift icon section and take a look at that bonus material. If you're listening to this episode anywhere else, I would encourage you to get the Beyond Clean app. It's the easiest way to access our episodes and sort through all of the different types of shows that we have running out on the channel. But that's going to do it for today's episode. And on behalf of Hank, myself, and the rest of the team over here at Beyond Clean, we'll remind you, as we always do here, until we talk to you next week, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.